You just have to make sure that you're keeping on top of where everything is, making changes and moves where you need to, but you get to design that. And that's the whole purpose of this, is that we get to take the risks that we think are worth it and that we've educated ourselves to take.
Welcome back, investor, to another episode of the Passive Income Adventures. Today, we have Angel Williams just talking about her journey from active W-2 employee to a passive investor to an active investor, and now their path back to being passive investors. We talked about how there's really no good time to retire. It's just, you got to make it happen. You just have to decide when you're going to make it happen, figure out what needs to happen, and then move forward. And so we're in this strange limbo area of being retired, self-employed, and in our case, unemployed, just trying to bring together multiple streams of income so that we can design what our lives look like. So we get to choose how we're spending our time, who we're spending it with, and what we want it to look like 5 or 10 years down the road. It's always nice to have a long-term goal and to be able to say, hey, here we are right now. This is where we want to be, and this is what we're working on to get there, and just bringing you along for the journey, because it's just not a get rich quick type of thing. It's not glamorous. It's just real life that we're sharing here. So Angel goes through all the details of her journey, what her life looks like right now, and what they're working towards in the future. I think you're going to see a lot of yourselves in this story, and you really be able to relate to it and get a clear picture of what it looks like to actually be living a passive income lifestyle so that you can go on more passive income adventures. Hey, investor, we have Angel Williams with us today. She is with Lorren Capital out of Wichita Falls, Texas, which is basically South Oklahoma, if none of you have ever heard of it before. She also runs the Academy Presents REI Rocks, and they have several online summits per year to educate active and passive investors on how to make the most of your capital in the multifamily space. So thanks for being with us today, Angel.
Oh, thanks for having me as a guest.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about this one because I know you really well, and I feel like we have talked about this many times. When my husband was wanting to quit his W-2, and you guys had basically been trailblazing that path ahead of us, and you had been having a better success with living on passive income than we were. And so it was really helpful to me early on in our relationship to see somebody actually doing what we were trying to do, and seeing the freedom that you were having, basically being able to make decisions about your work and your business and your lifestyle, because you didn't have to always think like, where is the next paycheck coming from? So can you give us a little bit about your background, your transition from like the W-2 into passive income, and now you're going back into the entrepreneurial space as a more active investor?
Absolutely. First off, Jason and I both grew up in families that invested in residential real estate. So we always saw that, at least watching my grandparents, I knew that was a side hustle, and it was really great. And so it didn't seem out of the norm for me. And then Jason's dad was also a professor, and then he had his residential stuff on the side as well. And so Jason and I both grew up in these families where investing in residential real estate was very real, very happening, and very lucrative. We bought our first house in 2003, and then it became our first rental in 2007. Now, and he and I have talked about this several times, I don't remember us ever having a conversation discussing, are we going to sell this or are we going to rent it? We just started looking for someone to do the make ready. There was never this question of, hey, are we going to sell the house? Are we going to keep it? Is it going to be a rental? Like, we never had that discussion. It just became a rental. We also never really discussed managing on our own. Jason's dad used a property manager. My grandparents self-managed. And I can remember, I think I've told the story a few times, but I remember there was a time when I was like 4-ish, maybe 5-ish. It was during the summer. My grandmother had short hair. My hair was short then. And we both had these little pigtails. And she put matching pigtails in her hair. And we got in the blue truck, which was one of the many work trucks Grandpa had, because they never had new cars ever. But we drove to the quadplex of the apartments. And my grandfather was a fireman. Then he worked at the prison. But he was a really good drywaller. So he could put up sheetrock. And I remember going to the apartments, and here he is sheetrocking another apartment. And he was doing the handyman stuff. Or he had a friend that also worked there locally that would come and do the plumbing. Or they had this shed of appliances, not new appliances, because this is the 80s and 90s. And when Grandma and Grandpa started buying properties with the late 70s, early 80s, when we had 20% as the federal funds rate, and brokers in there were crazy, but they had appliance repair guys that they would take the fridges or the stove or whatever. They would hire these appliance repair guys to come in and fix them. And so they also had this backup unit or backup shed of all these appliances, washers, dryers, things that they can swap out while they're getting stuff repaired. But looking back on it, that was my experience with self-managing and watching them. They would almost go door to door the first of the month to collect rent.
Yeah.
Or people would bring cash to the house and grandma would get out her receipt book and hand write out receipts. And I was like, I will never, ever self-manage because that was my experience with it. Jason's dad had property managers. But I bring all that up because I don't remember us really having a conversation of, are we going to self-manage? No, our conversations were, okay, we need to find a property manager. There were things that, because of our past experiences, it was never really up for discussion. Self-managing was not going to happen. And we never, ever discussed selling the house. We always knew it was going to be a rental. And that was what got us started. And for anyone thinking we're moving, we're going to sell this house, I say keep it. And the reason I say keep it is because you're never going to save up another 20% to buy another house. So just keep it. And it's not going to cash flow much. It doesn't have to. You need to cover your mortgage and then pull in maybe another couple $100.
Yeah.
And while you're not going to have some huge fat bankroll on the first of every month, you're building equity in another house. And when you do need to make moves, you don't have to talk to anybody else. You don't have to get together with a team. You just go make moves and you get a chunk of change and you can do bigger moves with that. Anybody that's telling you to get out of residential and go commercial all the way, I am a voice that opposes that because we still have our residential portfolio too.
I still have a residential portfolio. And I'll tell you, when my husband lost his job late last year, our first thought was, okay, which house are we going to sell? Because that was like a little savings account. And we don't want to sell the house. So you do everything you can to keep it. But knowing that it's there to be able to sell, like you said, without a committee meeting, without a vote, or just being able to say, hey, we need to liquidate this one. We can live off this much of it and the rest we can reinvest. There's just a lot of nimbleness in residential real estate that you just don't have in commercial. Pros and cons to everything. But is this something that you realized maybe when you were dating or early in your marriage that you had this similar background? Did you discuss it back then, or was it always, this is what everybody does?
This is the funny part. Like, I thought we were pretty similarly, I guess, seated when it comes to like backgrounds. I figured my family, pretty solid middle class. I thought Jason's family is probably pretty solid middle class. We'll just go with I married up. They act solid middle class. So we'll just kind of leave it there, which is, it's actually something that I want to do for our own children. But Jason said he never had any inkling of an idea as to how much his father had done in real estate.
Yeah.
No idea whatsoever.
Wow.
Other than his dad was into it. So it was weird and not weird. But I remember we would be at like the kitchen table and Jason's dad would talk about things. And I was always impressed because, so his dad was a biologist and then a mammologist. And then when he was getting his doctorate, he was doing it in museum studies. And it was Sweden, maybe, a place with a king and queen.
Yeah.
And so he got his doctorate from a country, Scandinavian, with king and queen. And his dad was like the foremost expert in some of the stuff that he needed to learn about as a museum preservation specialist. So his dad got to teach some of his own PhD courses.
Nice.
And I'm just kind of setting that up. So then it turns out his dad is like this mastermind at real estate. And then his dad starts doing stocks and he's day trading. And I'm like, what in the absolute heck? It was crazy because here's this guy that has this science background. I've got the business degree and he could outdo me every day of the week.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind.
Was it real estate that gave him that foundation? Because my mantra that I'm always harping on is live below your means. And I'm not telling people to live scorched earth, but the farther below your means you can handle living, the more extra money you will have to invest. And if you don't have the ability to live below your means, you need to make more money, get a side hustle or something like that. So it sounds like they were using real estate as a side hustle in addition to their normal jobs, and they were using that to build wealth. Or was he making this kind of cash and then being able to invest that in real estate from his job?
I don't think so. Over time, I've learned more about Jason's family, but like, his dad's whole side of the family was very well educated. Mm-hmm. And it turns out like there's U.S. presidents in their family tree. So yeah.
That carries down. That carries down.
So there are Eagle Scouts in the family. There's a lot of different things going on. So Jason's grandparents had created a limited partnership that also had farmland in it. They had oil on some of their land. There's a lot of things going on. And I think that just after talking to his dad and listening to his dad and hearing what his dad had to say about finances, the family must have been more open about how finances work.
Yes.
Not necessarily about what their personal finances looked like, but how finances worked. A biologist can't play the stocks like that strictly by being self-taught, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to be mean or anything else. I'm just saying I've never met a biologist that was such a astute businessman like his father was.
Mhm.
And I always loved talking to his dad because he would say things that just got me thinking. And so whether it was only on the side or not, I don't really know, because Jason's mom, now that his dad has passed away, his mom lives off of what that creates, has plenty of money to put aside. So I think back to the way it worked for like me and Jason. I was teaching still here, and we had replaced my income. I didn't have to teach. And I think Jason's dad was the same way. I don't think he had to be a professor.
Okay.
I think his income was well surpassed by what he was bringing in real estate.
So this was not a side hustle. This was the main source of wealth and got him to the point where his passive income allowed him the freedom to choose how he would spend his time in either an active pursuit of career, vocation, a business, charity, whatever it looks like. So that's what he was doing.
Yeah, I do think that's what he was doing. And I think that Jason saw that too. And so when I was teaching, it was because I wanted to teach. It started off because we needed insurance for our son.
Yeah.
Then I found insurance for our son outside of the W-2. We were no longer tied to W-2s at all, because I saw a meme the other day. It really got me thinking. It said, losing your job shouldn't also mean losing your medical, dental, and vision.
Yep.
So once I found insurance outside of our W-2, I was literally only only teaching because I loved to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And so when things got toxic there and things got really bad, Jason was like, yeah, you're not going back.
Yeah.
And that was like in December. It was December 4th of 2019.
Okay.
And I was actually in the ER, and Jason's like, yeah, you're not going back.
Okay.
It was super stressful, really toxic. And so I think the reason why it was so easy for him to say you're not going back is because my income was already replaced. We had already identified new insurance. I want to say we were even already paying for the new insurance. So we might not have been, but I think we were. And Jason was okay with me not having a job or only teaching a few courses here and there, doing some online gigs. We didn't really need it. We could make it on just what he was earning as an engineer. And so then we also had some passive investments going on, because we got into the multifamily space about 2017, 2018.
As lemon.
Yeah. So we were at an event in Grapevine, and Joe Fairless was there talking. The group was Memphis Invest. It was Clint Clothier Jr., Senior, and then the other youngest brother. And they had Memphis Invest, and it was basically they were doing a seminar. What Memphis Invest did was it was turnkey single families with people's self-directed IRA. And Joe was one of the speakers.
Okay.
And so Jason and Joe started talking, and at that point in time, his program was not anywhere the cost it is now. And I was like, that's so much money. And now I look back on it, it's like laughable. We should have just hopped on it.
Yeah.
But instead I was like, no, there's got to be something else we can do. And we wound up finding one of Joe's previous coaches and went into that program. It was substantially less, but we'll just go with you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And we floundered in that program for about a year and a half. And when we went back to Joe, his program was about 3 times as much. And that was a lesson learned for me. When you find a coach that you mesh with and you drive with and you love what they're doing, man, beg them, plead with them, let them help you do payments, do something, because at the end of the day, you're going to wind up with them anyway. And I cost us a year and a half of time and a lot of money.
Right. Yeah. I definitely have had that experience in my life this last year where I was dealing with some personal issues and grieving and some stuff that I hadn't really gotten out of the way. And it was really starting to impact my business. And my mindset was not where it needed to be. I wasn't taking care of my health and fitness. And so I reached out to a coach that I had connected with and was trying to justify how much it was going to cost. Called him up, explained the situation, and he said, how can we make this work for you? So we reduced the number of visits so that I could afford it. And he basically was willing to work with me and negotiate. And it was the best purchase personally that I've ever made, turned everything around and has put me in a much better position. And I feel like paying for good coaching is, like you said, you get what you pay for, do a good job, but make sure that, like you said, I like how you said that you mesh with him, that you know that you want to work with him eventually. It's if you want to pull the trigger, you don't always have to write a check for the full amount on day one. Just tell them, communicate, and see what you can work out. It's not always going to be able to be worked out, but I was really surprised when my coach just said, what would make this work for you? How can we make this work for you? And we just negotiated a good solution for his time versus what I could pay at the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's hard not to sit back and go, man, where would we be if we hadn't lost that year and a half? It's hard not to do that, but you can't. I think about don't cry over spilled milk, and I never really understood it I
Yeah.
was like, well, of course, it's really hard to get the milk back in the bowl, but it's really your sunk costs are over. And that year and a half is a sunk cost. I can't get it back. There's nothing I can do to make up for it. So I have to forget that happened and just look at where we are now. Because we wound up in a situation like as a passive investor, unless you are just independently wealthy, you're going to run out of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Happened to us. We were 4 deals in and we basically had no more money to invest. And it was 5 because we had the JV deal in the oil wells. But so we're like 5 deals in, we have no more to invest. And it was like, okay, Jason was still working as an engineer and it was going to be really hard to replace his income, which you don't necessarily have to replace the income, but you do have to cover your expenses. But even with that, with our single family portfolio, with the quad and a couple of duplexes we got when Jason's dad passed away, with all of that, we still weren't really covering our expenses. And so Jason's company decided to move to Houston and they didn't take him with them.
Oh.
So it was like, it wasn't that they didn't want him. I think it's more that he had 15 years of experience. He was the only person in the company that could do CFD. There was things that make him costly.
Yeah.
And I think the company was trying to streamline some of that, but they still hired him as a consultant to design their new lab. So he actually made more money doing the consulting stuff. So it was really weird, but it worked out for us because that meant that his last day was June 30th of last summer.
I remember that day. I remember just spill everything. I need to hear all of the details, how you do this. But the point that you made about not replacing his income, because that was our goal was to replace my husband's income. I was a full-time investor. He's full-time W-2, and I'm trying to replace his income. Replace his income is a huge pay cut when they walk away from that job or when you walk away from a job. But what we ended up doing was just saying, okay, now we can cover our expenses. We have not yet replaced his income, but with the extra time that he has between looking for a new job and unemployment and all of that, and then working the rest of the time on our business, he's able to make up the difference between just paying our expenses and replacing his income. He's able to do that himself rather than me having to do it first, then him coming out of the job and being like, okay, now what? Like, how am I supposed to spend my time? Gave him some action to jump straight into something so he didn't have to spend like a lost year of wondering what to do. So and the consultant thing, that's brilliant. It's like how to work half as much and get paid twice as much.
Yeah. So Jason was pulling 6 figures with his job. And by taking on the consulting, probably 65% pay cut.
Okay.
Which is still a lot.
Yeah.
I was saying, so call it $65,000 lost. We're not going to replace $65,000 with passive income. Sorry. For anyone out there believing that you're going to create $65,000 of passive income like that.
Yeah, it's a process. Exactly. Yep. It's a long process. But the process that you're talking about, though, that's actually really what I wanted to drill down into because there are just a lot of scams in this space. Pay us $100,000 for our online course. We'll set up your e-commerce store and you can go to retire on a beach in Mexico and not have to do anything. And we've seen people like that get basically arrested or prosecuted for communications fraud, for securities violations. Like that's just really not a thing. And so can you tell us right now what your life looks like as far as being able to replace income, supplement income with passive income streams, and the shift that you made from passive income, leaving the W-2 behind, and then now as more of an active multifamily syndicator?
Okay, so when I left teaching, we tried to get hold of my retirement account. If you are in the state of Texas and you have a TRS account, man, start bugging them for your money now. My problem, too, is that I was teaching some dual credit stuff for Vernon College here in town. And because Vernon College participates in the TRS program, even though they were not paying into my account, I couldn't get my money.
Okay. Ooh.
So now I'm in mode again, trying to get my $23,000 because it made $500 last year. So now I'm back in mode of trying to get my money because what I'm bringing up here is when you no longer have your W-2, take your 401k and put it into something self-directed.
Yep.
Or take that, whatever you've got, put it into something self-directed, whether that's an IRA or a 401k. Roll it into something you can self-direct because that is a huge chunk of change that once you get educated, you can double it up about every 5 to 7 years. Yep. And I think that is the piece that a lot of people are missing. And the other part of that too is they're like, oh, I can use my retirement funds. You don't get to have the happiness of the cash flow when you're using your retirement funds.
Correct.
You've got to have a balance there. You do have to have some cash to put in so that you can enjoy the cash flow, but you can grow the heck out of your retirement account and everything is just going straight back into that. So there's a 2-pronged approach there that makes it a lot more doable. But if you need the cash flow you're going to have to be pretty creative. I feel the 50,000 that you put in is going to get you about what you're going to get in a single family home. And I say that because if you're following the 1% rule on your single families, you're probably only cash flowing $100 to maybe $300 a month, maybe. We're usually doing between 1 and 2.
Okay.
If you put 50,000 into a deal and it's a fairly regular deal, you're looking at 16% IRR, maybe 7-8% cash on cash. Maybe there's a pref, but it's running about 20% average returns per year. You're only looking at about $100, $200 a month.
Yeah.
So for me, once I made that connection, that's why I say, don't get out of your residential stuff.
The residential is what cash flows. That's what's carrying us right now. Yeah. That's what's carrying us. And then we're snowballing the commercial stuff because eventually, once you build up enough of that, and it takes I would say somewhere between $1.5 to $2 million of invested cash before you really can start living on that 6 figures passively from your commercial portfolio without doing any of the work. That's the goal. But in the meantime, it's the little stuff that pays us every month that turns, like I said, it's just more nimble. And while we're building up the process, I think that it's very important that you point out this is a process. It's a long process. You've got to snowball these investments so they can start paying you cash flow so you can live off of a 7 or 8% cash on cash return and still match your lifestyle. And then once you have that piled up, and the way that we're doing that is selling houses and then one at a time, slowly putting those into commercial real estate so that we can get that critical mass that we need. And that's really the key. Living below your means, buying some investments, and then trading up or trading out or whatever. I don't know if we'll ever get completely out of our residentials, but I don't really like managing them. And so I think we probably eventually will, but it's going to be a slow, deliberate process to snowball those commercials. And you have my retirement account or part of my retirement account right now. And the reason we did that is because we can't have the cash flow in that retirement account. And so we're just looking for a deal that just has great returns and it's skinny on the front end, fat on the back end, because for me, those high returns are great for a retirement account. And then the cash that we're investing, it has to be for cash flow. So we're trading big chunks of cash when we sell something or whatever for cash flow. And so we have 2 different strategies going on, one for cash flow and one for high returns.
Yeah, I think too that changes over time because I have friends that are older that they're having to do their RMDs, so they're required distributions out of their retirement accounts, and they don't need more cash flow. They want to continue building up, so they will invest with a retirement account. Or you've got people that they want the cash flow. They don't necessarily have to have the cash flow, but they'd rather have the cash flow than have more money sitting in a retirement account. And so they're investing cash only. And it's really funny to see how people's investing habits change.
Yes.
And one age group versus another age group, and you just watch those things. And I think that's where Jason and I really understood we need to be playing it in 2 prongs. We need to be doing 2 things. We need to be focusing on the cash flow piece of it, which is what we really do over at our residential stuff. And then we're growing in the commercial space with the retirement funds because we're younger and we've still got another 10, 15 years to build up those retirement accounts. Now, the other thing I would say is that as you get older, you need less stuff. I have a friend that all she does is passive investing, but she GPs a lot, helps raise capital. She helps asset manage. But really, she said she's got 10 or 12 deals that she's passive in, and that's what she lives off of.
Yeah.
And that's not a whole lot. If you're thinking every $50,000 is $100 and you got 50,000 in 10 deals, what are you talking now? 1,000? Is that 1,000?
If you have $1 million out, it's $50,000 across 20 deals. If you're doing a average 7-8%, you start looking about 80-ish, let's say, a year. And so that's a lot of money. But I think it's really important to say that's what it takes. And it's no different than retiring on the stock market as far as, hey, you need this much money, you're going to live on a 4% rule. For me, it's like I can live off of an 8% rule. And that's the difference between real estate and other types of investments is they just tend to perform better than average. And so I need less cash to make the same amount of money because a dividend paying stock is what, 2 or something like that. And I'm doing a 7 to 8% average preferred return. And then that doesn't even include what I'm going to make when they sell the property 3, 5, 7 years down the road. And so it's just really a snowball.
But I think that's the big difference. So the residential I like because it's an amazing store value and I can do what I want with it and get big chunks of change at one time.
Yep.
With passive multifamily or even active multifamily, yes, there's some cash flow there, but whenever there's a big capital event, you get a big chunk
Mm.
of change. Now, the caveat to that is that you also get a crazy amount of depreciation
Okay.
and deductions. So in your residential, you shouldn't be paying much taxes anyway. You should be figuring out how to reduce your income from those to zero, whether that's through repairs or exterior work, whatever you're doing. There's ways to get it to zero. And passive multifamily, it's done for you. So even with property managers on the residential side, you're still doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You're fielding those phone calls about the roof. You're talking to them about the plumbing because you got another slab leak.
Yep.
Or the landscaper has gone, God knows where. He's a missing person. We need to find a new landscaper. You're still taking care of all of those calls. When you're passive in a multifamily deal, you just literally get distributions. You look at your account one day, you're like, oh,
I got paid.
yay, I got money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's totally different as far as what's passive. Passive is like a whole array.
Yes.
So there's like passive, but I'm on the phone all the time. And then there's passive. I don't do anything. I just get money.
Yeah.
But the part of that is the multifamily stuff. You're going to get that bonus depreciation. And even though it's sunsetting, you're still going to get a lot of depreciation.
Yeah.
So usually like on the base level, if you put $100,000 into a deal, you're going to get like between around 35,000 at the low end in deductions in year one. Now, this year you only get 80% of that, but that doesn't mean that you lose the other 20. It means the other 20 stays in the buckets that it would normally depreciate on. If you're doing cost seg. If you're just letting it straight line anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You'll get the same deduction every year pretty much.
And then me as a real estate professional, because I don't have another job, we're able to have unlimited losses every year. And so we don't have to wait. So we're not capped out at how many losses we can claim, those phantom losses or depreciation. We just get them all every single year. And so we go around collecting tax benefits like Halloween candy. So, okay, how can we do this so that we are not paying any taxes at the end of the year? And sometimes we even get a big refund, and then we can use that chunk of cash to go make an investment with. So the tax savings on these types of real estate investments, it's above and beyond that 7 or 8% cash flow. You're getting no tax bill. You're getting a refund. If sometimes we can't help but get a refund, we do everything we can and we still get a refund. And then we're able to double up basically on that tax saving. And so it's not just about how you have $2 million and now you're making this much cash flow on a 7 or 8% return. It's the back end, the upside, it's the tax savings, and then just the time that you save. What are you going to do with that time? Like in our case, we opened a private equity fund. So let's go teach other people how to do this because it's been so great in our lives. Like we could make some extra cash because, we're not flying a private jet. We're still trying to bridge the gap. And so for us, it was just a
Your idea of vacation is hiking a trail in tents.
Yeah, seriously. And it's like, I don't think we can afford to eat at a restaurant in this town, kids. Like, here's some more free-trade food. So yeah, we're definitely we're in lean fire right now. So financial independence, retire early. It's just definitely very lean, but we're using that extra time that we're saving to go out and pursue like fat fire where we can be like, yeah, you want some extra fries with that, kiddo?
I think what you're saying, like with the time thing, I'm thinking about like just today. So we're prepping up for our next summit and I had 4 different recordings today, but in the 20, 30, 40 minutes in between, I can go hang out with Jason because he's here too.
Yep.
And we can get Ophelia out of her crate and we can love on Ophelia and just be chill for a little bit.
Yep. Lots of little breaks during the day.
Yeah. You can't put a value on that.
Yeah. We both work part-time right now. Like we could work more, but we're trying to retire. And so we're trying to make sure that our lifestyle stays in line and is conducive with our passive income adventure goals. Because if we start a big business or whatever, then it's just another job. And so we just want to make sure that lifestyle design that we had at the beginning, that we've been really staying true to that through vision boards and just reconnecting with that. So what does that look like for you and your family?
We are not like Grant Tone, like not Grant Cardone. We're not like, who's got my money? Who's got my money? But we're trying to figure out how to pay for tuition for 3 girls in private school to get Anson the kind of insurance that is smart for what he has. We're looking at, I think we're paying $3,200 a month.
Yep.
And some people are like, oh my God. Number one, that's all, it's deductible.
Yeah.
But it means that we have a $250 deductible for his insurance. One of his therapies is $100,000 to $120,000 a year.
Yeah.
And that's just one therapy. So really, as long as our insurance is less than that therapy, it makes more sense to have the insurance. And when it comes to like, how are we going to cover that? Jason does the underwriting business on the side. We've got a mastermind. He's still got his consulting thing. He still does the consulting thing every now and then, and it's doing pretty well. and he's looking at starting his own consulting company for the R&D piece of his engineering stuff and his underwriting company that he has. And then we've got our summits, we've got the REI Rocks, and then we've also got our own investments. And the other goal too is like you'll start out passive, try to learn things, then you run out of money and you have to go active. And our end goal is to be active long enough to go passive again.
Yeah. It's a cycle. It's a cycle. And it's just where you are in it. Like, how's your income doing? Is your investment paying you the way that you thought it would? Do we need to go sell some consulting services? Do we need to sell a house? Like, it's portfolio management is a part-time job. And it's really important to point out like that we're passing it because we do have to manage our little landlord buy and hold residential, and we do have to manage our portfolios. And so keeping an eye on that stuff, we just treat that like a part-time job.
Yeah, well, and I would say too, like almost even having what you're saying, like an employment portfolio. So I still teach college, still do some scoring stuff for ETS and for College Board. And if things get tough, I try and find more tests to score. I look for stuff that I can do online because if we need something to help get us through a month, then I still need to have something on the side that we can get enough to pay for the groceries this month, because we get all organic groceries. Or if we need something to help pay when we still had our nanny, something to help pay for the nanny, then that was when I was still doing some substitute teaching, because I'd be like, okay, this pays for the nanny for this week if I sub 2 or 3 days that week. It was keeping those things in mind. I just say don't ever fully burn the bridges.
Yeah.
Because you just never know. And Jason and I had a pretty in-depth conversation a couple of weeks ago about just our expenses. And this sounds really bad. I haven't had to worry about my checkbook or the amount of money in my bank account for a long time, at least 5 years, maybe more.
Okay.
And I got spoiled to that.
Yeah.
And so then, like, he no longer has a W-2, and I started getting these charges on my account. I'm like, what is this? They were like overcharged, like overdraft charges. And I'm calling my bank. I'm like, what's going on here? I had to move his stuff around and change accounts and stuff because there was no more money coming into that account because the direct deposits were gone. So like I had to shift some stuff around. But still having some of those jobs in play gives me, I can pick up some slack when we need to, because what the conversation he and I were having was our expenses are up. We have to cut expenses. And he was stressed out. And like I said, I hadn't even been looking at my checking account. So then him being stressed out gets me stressed out because I'm like, wait a second, I haven't had to worry about this since I was the breadwinner back in 03, 04 teaching in a private school, like with my $15,000 a year as a breadwinner. Like, I hadn't had to worry about the finances for a really long time. And so I got stressed out. And then he's like, oh my God, I'm sorry. Because when I get stressed out, it's real ugly, not good at stress. And probably maybe a day or so later, he said, you know what? This is just temporary.
Yeah.
This is just temporary. And I'm sorry I freaked out. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry I freaked out too. But it was that mindset shift that occurred a long time ago. But then getting freaked out, thinking we got to cut expenses, no more avocado toast, no more Starbucks trips, which, by the way, guys, those things are not what's making me poor.
No,
that's not what's making
it's your car.
Yeah, but it was just like coming back and saying, wait a second, this is temporary. And us being able to realize this is temporary, this is part of the process. The retirement fund is still growing. We've still got money in these investments. We're in like 7 passive investments right now, I think. Some for cash flow, some to grow the retirement account. And it was just taking a moment and saying, okay. And I was like, hey, I'm going to get paid for teaching this semester on February 15th. So there will be like $500 or $600 there. That'll help pay for some of the groceries. And I was like, and I'm going to do some ETS stuff next month. We're going to have some money coming in. And then it was realizing, wait a second, our quarterly distributions are about to hit.
Yeah.
But in that moment, when you're looking at, I think I had $150 worth of charges for insufficient funds. And I called the bank so much that the lady was like, okay, I'll just turn it.
Yeah.
I'll refund it. It was bad. It was really bad because like I knew the lady by name. She knew me by name. I knew when she picked up the phone, like I knew her voice because we've been talking so much. But it was that shock of reality of, oh my God, we don't have a check coming in and things look really bad right now. But then coming to the realization that this is temporary. We've been working for this freedom.
Yes.
We chose this risk.
Yes.
And just recognizing that it's temporary. This is just it's a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe a month. And then we'll be fine again.
Yep.
And we just need to pay more attention to where things are directed and how we're paying for different items and making sure it's going to the right accounts, making sure we're managing it correctly. Because it is a job to manage your portfolio, whether it's your employment portfolio, your expense portfolio, because your expenses are coming from everywhere,
Yeah.
and
Capital call.
where things coming in. You just have to make sure that you're keeping on top of where everything is, making changes and moves where you need to, but you get to design that. And that's the whole purpose of this, is that we get to take the risks that we think are worth it and that we've educated ourselves to take. And that's what, yeah.
Well, it's the question of, when do you want to retire? We all have to retire, and we're all building up some sort of a retirement nest egg, whether it's a 4% rule or 8% rule, whatever it is. You have to retire someday. We live a long time. So we just made the decision we wanted to retire at 50. And okay, what do we need to do to retire at 50? I'm 46, he's 48. So we're not really retired right now. I'd call us more self-employed. And at 50, we're having some goals set and putting some things in motion so that we can say, okay, now we're just going to be retired by managing our portfolio and not be as actively involved. So people are listening to this thinking, oh, you're retired early, you must be so wealthy. All these apartment buildings, you must be so wealthy. No, it's definitely a process. You choose the retirement date, you put the things in place so that you can retire on that date. Whether it's 50 or whether it's age 65, you get to pick when you retire, and you get to back into how much money you need set aside at what rate of return so that you can retire on the date you chose to retire. And we're not trying to paint an unrealistic picture here of how we can just do whatever we want and fix any problem by waving around our plastic card. It's more about how to reclaim your time and how to reclaim your freedom, and you being in charge of those decisions about when you retire and how much money you need to be making and how long you're going to be self-employed in that early lean retirement phase. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing. So come into the future now. Paint me like the next 5 years. What's your next big passive income adventure, either professionally or personally?
We intend to become the king and queen of Wichita Falls multifamily.
Oh,
So we're going to buy ourselves here.
the queen of Wichita Falls.
Of commercial multifamily in Wichita Falls, because we want to be able to make an impact in the housing here. The families of like the students that I taught. We taught at a high poverty school, Title I. And so when I look at apartments, even though my students may not be living there, my memories of them live there.
Yes.
And so I see them in the courtyard or on the playground equipment, or rocking their brother or their sister on the front porch, or holding their siblings sitting on a couch in an apartment. I see those things. And I want us to own enough of this town that we can make sure that those memories of my students, those families, are cared for in the best possible way at that price point. And so I want to have enough to make an impact, to care for those families and to care for those individuals. And so that's my ultimate goal. Jason's, I think Jason's goal is probably different because he wasn't in the classroom like I was.
Yeah.
But that's what I want to do, is that I want to make a difference in those people's lives and show them that it doesn't have to be miserable. It can be amazing. And just to provide the best I can here, and to be able to do that, we've put it out there maybe more than somebody that's coming to invest here from out of town really can't compete with us. We've been investing on the residential side here for over 15 years. We've got B homes, we've got C homes. We've got a real good feel for how things happen here. And if anything does happen at one of our properties, one property is like 15 minutes from the house, the other one's 3.5 miles. We just go there.
Yeah. That was a big thing for me when I'm like, what should I do with because when he left his job in November, we had a retirement rollover. Okay, so we got a little chunk of cash here from this particular job. And what are we going to do with it? And it just made sense because you guys live like 5 minutes from your properties. And I live 2.5 hours away from our first commercial property. And it's a lot farther than I thought it was when we bought it. 10, 20, 30 minutes. It's a huge asset that you have.
Yeah. In most of the coaching programs that we've seen or heard about, most of the time, those coaches are saying 2 hours. If it's within 2 hours, you're fine. Well, that would put us in the DFW area.
Yeah.
And DFW is pretty saturated, but there's still deals to be had there. I think about something that happened over at Thousand Mary, and I think, okay, we got an email that said, hey, your insurance is going to be canceled in the next 24 hours if you haven't fixed those stairwells and gotten those rails from 5 inches to less than 4. And that day, I drove over there, and I said, we got to fix this.
Yeah.
Because I need to be able to take pictures and send them to the insurance now. We decided we were going to put rebar in the middle, and it was going to be welded in. We had to get a floater from a different complex to come over that could weld. And all of that stuff took like 3-4 hours. I think he started welding at 2. And I got there as soon as I saw the email. So if that had been a property 2 hours away, I get the email at 11, I drive. This is thinking that I'm already ready. when I'm at home, I'm not already ready. I love Zoom. I only have to get dressed up from the waist up. I can be wearing my pajama pants all day, every day.
I'm totally in
we're
pajama
sitting.
pants right now.
I'm wearing pajama shorts, but it's like I would have to drive 2 hours. So that would put me there at 1. If it took the same 3 hours for a welder to be located, bar to be bought and brought back, now we're talking about starting welding at 4. If you stay beyond 5, that's overtime.
Yeah.
And so it would have been a much longer process, and I probably wouldn't have been able to get the coverage to stay.
Yeah.
Because the way it worked out, we had 1 stairway completed that day. And I was able to take pictures of that completed stairwell and say, we are in progress. Here is the receipt. This is all the rebar we have bought. This is the guy's, this is his welder. He's here welding. We're cutting, we're welding. We're doing all these things right now. And I was able to do that because we're so close.
Makes huge sense.
And yeah, I just think about it like, and 2 hours is if I'm ready to hop in the car and move right there.
Yeah.
It's filled up. I don't got to gas up. I don't got to change clothes. None of those things.
Yeah.
So it makes a big difference. And I'm super spoiled now. But we had some really good deals come across to us totally off market from friends. And we're like, oh, I don't know.
So far.
Ew, it's 2 hours away. And they're like, well, but 2 hours is fine because that's what the coaches say. And now I'm so spoiled. I would have never thought that we would invest in multifamily in our backyard. Population hasn't changed here since 1960. We've been like 104,000 people since 1960.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't go down either. But it's just super steady here. This was never on my radar as a place to invest in. And now I can't imagine investing anywhere else.
Yeah. And you do have the corner on that right now as the boomers are retiring and you can pick up their property. So Angel, how do people get a hold of you? What's the best way to reach out? And I always ask all of our guests, why should people reach out to you?
All right. So probably the best way is LinkedIn. I try to always answer everything in LinkedIn pretty quickly. You can get a hold of me through email. I'm not as fast to respond to email. So I'm Angel Williams on LinkedIn. We also have a Facebook group that we do a lot in, but LinkedIn, like I said, is probably the fastest way to get a hold of me, unless you have my cell phone number. If you have a cell phone number, that's probably pretty quick too.
I got that.
I don't understand. But as for like why, we've got a virtual meetup every Monday. And just like here, we're pretty laid back. We're going to share information. If you ask questions, and this is the teacher in me, I'm never going to say somebody has a stupid question, because the reality of it is if you have the question, somebody else does too, and they don't have the guts to ask it.
Yeah.
So I'm never going to put somebody down for their questions. I'm always going to do the best I can to answer them. And if I can't answer them in our meetup, I'll ask it to the whole big group. So if we're in a breakout room and you ask me a question, I can't answer it or I can't help enough. When we go to the big group, I'll ask the big group and I won't say it was you. And there are some really knowledgeable people that come to that meetup and they will answer your questions. And so that's my offer, is that we are in the education space for real estate, and I will help you get your questions answered. Even if that doesn't mean that I'm answering them, I will help you identify the person that can answer your questions.
Is this the part where you mentioned that you have a master's degree in economics? Because you never mentioned that.
I don't think about it.
Yeah, you've got this teacher background, you've got the practical experience from the investing both passively and now actively, and you've got the educational background to really back it up. And that's my goal on this podcast, is to continually putting people in front of you, the listener, who loves to teach. Like, we love to teach. If you have a question, reach out. We are excited to help you learn. We are excited to share how we've gotten more freedom in our lifestyle and how we can continue to grow that so that we can continue to reach for bigger goals and bigger dreams year after year. And so please reach out. We want to be in your network. That's how we get stuff done in this industry. It's just the more people you know who to call, ask questions to, partner up with, invest with. It just makes the whole industry go around. So we're looking forward to hearing from you after the show. Thank you, Ian.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. And when are your summits? I know you have them regularly. What months of the year do you have them for everybody?
We have them in March and September. And the next one is coming up March 23rd, 24th, and 25th. There's about 35 hours of pre-recorded content available on the free tier, which is like the entry-level tier. If you want to be in the live stuff, which is live panels, live roundtables, there's actually going to be 3 master classes. So if you're wanting to learn more about capital raising, Yakov Smart is going to run the first master class on the 23rd. Amy Silvas is going to be talking a little bit about her LinkedIn secrets class on the 24th. And then I'm going to come back in and talk a little bit about our success and our methods for capital raising on that Saturday, which is the 25th. And we would love to have you come be a part of it. And to get info on that, it's www.theacademypresents.com. And that should have at least something that points you in the right direction for the summit.
And if somebody wants to invest with you, what website should they visit to see what deals you have?
That would be over on Lorren So it's LORENCAPITAL.com.
Awesome.
My middle name and Jason's middle name squished together.
Yeah, I've always wondered where that name came from. All right, Angel, thanks so much for joining us today, sharing your story. I just feel like it's inspiring just to see people who are just making it happen and just making it work. So appreciate you sharing that with us today.
Absolutely.
What a great story. I find Angel to be so inspiring because she's one of those people that is a couple of steps ahead of us on this journey, and just watching what she's done and learning from her. It's what we're always saying. Find people who are doing what you want to be doing, spend more time with them, and just copy what they're doing. And so I have several role models in my life who are basically living the passive income lifestyle, showing that it's a real thing, showing how to get there. It is a process. Definitely. It takes a while. Like I said, there's no get rich quick in passive income. And that's the journey that we want to share, that it helps you to make sure that you're looking out for the real opportunities and not falling prey to some of the less legitimate opportunities out there. So I hope you learned a lot by listening to Angel's story, and you feel inspired that you get to pick the time when you retire, and you get to pick what that looks like. Whether or not you want to live below your means, whether or not you want to be self-employed, whether or not you want to have multiple streams of income, or wait longer until your nest egg is the size that you can just outright retire. It really is up to you what that looks like. And we're just here to show different ways that can happen for each person. So thank you for joining us today. We really mean it when we say we want you to reach out to us after the show. Please connect with Angel at LorrenCapital.com. I will be speaking at her next summit, the REI Rocks, that they put on twice a year. And be sure to reach out to me at www.highrise.group/contact. It has all of my social links there, a link to book some time on my calendar, whether you need a free call or you want to book an accountability call so that you can get to work on your goals, especially if you're struggling a little bit with the direction, or maybe you have some goals and you're just not quite making it happen. Sometimes it's great to have an accountability partner to help you through that process. Also, be sure to check out the investments that we currently have available for accredited investors listed on our website. And if you're not accredited, it's a great time to set up a welcome discovery call so you can find out what types of investing opportunities you have as an unaccredited investor. There's a whole world out there of investing opportunities that I and all of my guests on this podcast would love to share with you so that you can go on your next passive income adventure. Thanks for joining us.